You're 5 minutes late, Nate. And this company doesn't wait for janitors who can't tell time.
The words hit like a slap in the dead center of the Titan Core lobby. Phones stopped scrolling. Forks hovered midair over break room salads. The CEO hadn't raised his voice, but he didn't need to. His tone was laced with the same sleek venom as his cufflinks. "I had a situation with my daughter," Nate said evenly, still catching his breath. "She's stable now." Marcus Ellery leaned in, smiling too much for it to be kind. "Then maybe you should be with her. Pack up your cart." Pause. Nate didn't flinch. "You sure you want to fire the only man in this building who knows how to open the sealed fire doors if something goes wrong?" Marcus blinked. A fractional hesitation. A single breath. Then the scoff. "Fire doors? You mop. Leave the emergencies to professionals." You're watching a man lose his job in front of 40 people for being 5 minutes late. But what they don't know is that before he pushed that cart, he commanded teams through smoke and death. So stay close, because this won't take long. And this same CEO, he'll be begging the janitor by part 6. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just nodded once and walked away. Calm, unshakable. Not because he didn't care, because he'd learned where fire burned hottest. You see, he wasn't late because he overslept. He was late because his daughter had a mild asthma attack, and he spent 10 minutes calibrating her nebulizer by hand, because the cheap one broke. He wasn't late because he didn't value the job. He was late because he remembered the sound of a child's chest rattling like broken blinds, and he never wanted to hear it again. He left a life behind for her, a uniform, a rank, a badge, all folded neatly in a storage box she's never seen. Because after losing her mother, she needed him more than the city did. Where are you watching from? Because here's what they don't know yet. You don't humiliate a man who already crawled through hell and came out with a little girl holding his hand. Marcus Ellery just made the mistake of firing the one man who doesn't panic when everything's on fire. The doors of Titan Core shut behind him with a hiss. Nate didn't look back. The security badge, deactivated the moment the CEO raised his voice, lay limp in his back pocket. His cart had been wheeled to the side like discarded luggage at an airport, mop bucket still half full, ammonia scent lingering behind him like an insult. Outside, the morning sun reflected off glass and steel as if mocking him. His shoes, still damp from cleaning the executive floor, squelched softly on the pavement as he crossed to the bus stop. He wouldn't cry. Lila had seen him cry once, when they buried her mother, and once was enough. He checked his phone. 14 unread messages. The pharmacy still hadn't confirmed the refill. Rent due next week. And a missed call from the school nurse. A group of young interns passed him, laughing. One of them hesitated. Kayla from floor 7. Her eyes met his briefly. She didn't speak, just gave a small nod. The kind people give right before they return to being invisible. He sat on the bench, opened his backpack, and pulled out a plastic folder. Inside, Lila's drawing, crayons on printer paper. It showed him not as a janitor, but as a hero. Helmet. Flames. Someone being pulled from wreckage. She had no idea that it was real. That once, that was who he was. The rumble of a motorcycle echoed nearby. Nate looked up, instinctively calculating speed, proximity, driver focus, until he realized it was habit. Residue from another life. One he buried when his wife died, and the badge became too heavy for a single father to carry. His phone buzzed again. Missed call. School nurse 1, new voicemail. He tapped to play. Hi, Mr. Kessler. Lila had a coughing spell again today. Nothing serious, but her inhaler's nearly empty. Just wanted to let you know. Nothing serious? He exhaled slowly. Not today, he told himself. You're still breathing. You'll figure it out. A bus hissed to a stop in front of him. He boarded silently, nodding to the driver, and stood near the back door, eyes on the city blurring past. A luxury SUV passed the bus at the next intersection. In the back seat, behind tinted glass, Marcus Ellery sipped something from a steel cup and laughed at something on his phone. Nate didn't need revenge. That wasn't what this was about. But life has a strange way of circling back with smoke, metal, and fire. And when it does, only one man will know exactly what to do. The apartment still smelled like vinegar and old floor polish. Nate pushed open the door with a shoulder, holding 2 bags of groceries and a silent scream behind his teeth. Lila's voice came floating down the hallway before he even called out. "Daddy, I'm drawing the rescue again." He set the bags down on the kitchen counter and rubbed the bridge of his nose. His hands still smelled faintly of bleach and dust. He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to the red inhaler cap sitting open on the table, empty. The plastic shell looked harmless, useless now. He grabbed his phone from his pocket and pulled up the pharmacy app again. Still pending. Still no insurance confirmation. He had switched providers 3 months ago. Still hadn't sorted the paperwork. She needed that inhaler. Yesterday. He glanced at the folded note tucked under a fridge magnet. It was from her teacher. "Lila had a bit of trouble breathing after recess. She's such a trooper, though. Let us know if we can help." Underneath was a crayon drawing, Lila holding her breath, a stick figure beside her blowing air like a dragon. Nate closed his eyes and breathed in through his nose. Just once. Then he called out, calm as ever. "You finished your homework?" There was the sound of crayons scraping across paper. "Yep, and I did extra pages. The rescue pictures got flames this time." "Good girl," he said. He opened the fridge. A carton of eggs, 2 slices of bread in a plastic bag, a half-empty jug of orange juice. He pulled the eggs and started cracking them into a pan without thinking. Motion soothed him. It always had. Behind him, the floor creaked. Lila's small frame appeared in the doorway. She wore an oversized T-shirt with a faded fire truck on it, one of his old department shirts, knotted at her waist like a dress. "You're not going to work?" she asked. He kept flipping the eggs. "I was late today. Because of me." He turned to her, slowly. "Because I'm your dad." She nodded. "But are they mad?" He hesitated. This was the tightrope. The place between honesty and protection. The space where fathers chose their words like surgeons. "They don't understand everything, that's all." Her face pinched. "But you saved people. You told me about the old hotel with the dog and the baby and the..." He walked over, crouched to her level, and put his hands on her shoulders. "I also told you that sometimes, even when you do the right thing, people don't see it." She looked up at him, eyes big and serious. "But they will, right?" A beat. "I don't know," he said. "But I see it. You matter more than any boss I'll ever have." She wrapped her arms around his neck and held tight. He closed his eyes. Her breath was still shallow. He could hear the faint whistle of her lungs. When she pulled back, she grinned. "Can we go to the corner store later?" He nodded. "After dinner. You picked the cereal this time." She ran off and he returned to the stove. But his shoulders didn't drop. Not fully. The corner store would be a stretch. He had $22 left until Thursday. The inhaler refill was $90, insurance pending. He glanced at the wall near the counter, lined with old photos. Lila on his shoulders, her mother holding a fire helmet over her baby bump. Him at graduation, badge freshly pinned. It was all a lifetime ago. He wondered how Marcus would explain firing someone over 5 minutes to his own daughter. Or maybe Marcus didn't have kids. Maybe men like that didn't need anyone to rely on them. Nate cleaned the dishes after dinner, swept the living room, checked the locks twice. When Lila was asleep, he went to the closet and opened a long-forgotten box. Inside, a carefully folded turnout coat, his old helmet, a department patch. Beneath that, photos of burn victims he'd pulled from collapsed stairwells, a letter of commendation, a thank you note written in crayon by a child he'd rescued from a dryer fire. It looked just like Lila's handwriting now. He sat there for a while, holding the helmet in his lap like it still carried weight. He hadn't worn it in 4 years. Back then he thought walking away from fire meant peace. But watching her sleep, hearing the faint rasp of her breath through the cracked door, he felt the old itch again. The one that woke up when someone was in trouble. The one that didn't care about titles or paychecks or suits. The one that just moved. It never really left him. He had only tried to bury it beneath mops and ammonia and quiet rooms. A scream echoed faintly from the street. He stood. A second later, tires screeched. A loud crash snapped through the night. Then silence. Then the rising note of voices, panic in them. Nate was already at the window. Down the block, smoke. He was out the door in 10 seconds, barefoot, no phone, no hesitation. The fire had come to find him again, and this time, it wasn't asking for permission. The air outside tasted like copper and adrenaline. Nate sprinted barefoot down the block, his muscles moving before thought could catch up. Smoke poured from the crumpled hood of a small sedan, steam rising where the engine kissed the concrete wall. The driver's door was wedged shut. Flames danced along the undercarriage. People stood around filming. Nobody moved in. He darted through the crowd, shoulder-checking a man who stood with his phone raised. "Hey!" the man shouted. But Nate was already at the car, crouched low, peering inside. A woman, mid-30s, airbag deployed, conscious but stunned. Blood smeared down the side of her face, and smoke, curling past the footwell. "Can you move?" Nate asked, voice firm. She blinked. I think... My leg's pinned." He didn't waste time, just nodded. "I'm getting you out." The flames licked higher, catching the edge of the passenger seat. He tried the back door. Locked. He wrapped the edge of his shirt around his elbow, smashed the window, and reached in to pull the lock. His mind moved like it always had in the field. Assessment, action, solution, smell of burning rubber, temperature spike at the back tires. No time for extraction through driver's side. Passenger door compromised. He braced his foot against the car's side panel and used both arms to wedge the rear door open just wide enough to crawl in. The metal groaned beneath him. The seatbelt latch wouldn't release. He reached around and unclipped it manually, fingers brushing her chest. She flinched, but he kept speaking calmly. Deep breaths. One's coming in, one's going out. "What?" she gasped. "You're in shock," he said. "Breathe anyway." The metal around her left leg was twisted in a hook. He looked at the positioning. If he pulled too fast, it'd shear bone. He used a piece of the airbag fabric, tore it, and began looping it around her thigh for pressure. From the crowd, someone yelled, "Get away from the car, man. It's gonna blow." He didn't answer. He was tying off the tourniquet. Then he placed his hands under her arms. "On 3, I'm gonna slide you back, not up. Ready?" She whimpered. 1, 2, 3. The car shifted. A high-pitched whine began in the engine. He dragged her out of the back seat like lifting dead weight. Her foot still caught. He twisted just enough to free it. The moment they hit the pavement, he rolled her toward the curb, away from the heat. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Then the horn began to blare, a long mechanical wail, and flames burst from under the hood. Someone screamed. He placed his hand on her chest and counted, still breathing, heart racing, but stable, sirens in the distance. He looked up and realized someone had filmed the entire thing. A woman across the street, phone raised, mouth agape, tears on her cheeks. Nate stood slowly, turning toward the sirens as they arrived. Lights painted the street in red and blue. EMTs spilled out like a flood. One of them sprinted up, slowing only when he saw Nate kneeling beside the victim. "She's stable," Nate said. "Left tibia caught on impact. You'll want to scan for fracture along the distal third." The EMT blinked. "Who the hell are you?" Nate stood. His chest rose and fell. "Just a janitor." He stepped back, hands up. One of the firemen turned toward him, recognition flaring behind his eyes. "Nate?" he said, voice rising. Nate didn't answer. The man pulled off his helmet. "Captain Kessler? From Westbridge?" A few heads turned, but Nate was already walking back up the sidewalk, blood drying on his shirt, glass in his heel. He didn't limp. He needed to get home before Lila woke up. At Titan Core, Marcus Ellery's penthouse-level office gleamed with low lighting and high ceilings. The city stretched out in grids of gold and glass. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling through quarterly projections. Then his phone buzzed. He ignored it. Buzzed again. Irritated, he reached for it. It was Kayla from floor 7, one of the interns. She never texted him directly. "Turn on channel 4. You're going to want to see this." He raised an eyebrow, grabbed the remote, and tapped the TV on. The screen flickered. A reporter stood in front of flashing lights and smoke. Behind her, paramedics worked over a woman on a stretcher. And miraculously, the man you see here, the one who dragged the victim from the vehicle before fire crews arrived, is being hailed a hero tonight. Witnesses say he acted without hesitation, stabilizing the woman, applying a tourniquet, and coordinating rescue protocol before disappearing into the crowd. "We've just learned his name may be Nate Kessler." Marcus sat forward. "Recently terminated from Titan Core Logistics earlier today." The anchor continued, but Marcus no longer heard her. He watched the footage. Zoomed-in grainy cell phone video showed Nate kneeling beside the woman. Calm, efficient, direct. The camera panned just enough to catch his face. Marcus felt something twist in his gut. He didn't know what yet, but it felt a lot like regret. The morning after the rescue, the video had already passed 50,000 views. It was grainy, angled from behind a trash can, and shot through smoke, but it didn't matter. People weren't watching for quality. They were watching the way a man no one recognized by name took control of a burning car like he'd done it 100 times before. Comments scrolled beneath it faster than anyone could keep up. "That man used a seatbelt as a compression wrap? Where did he learn that? He checked for spinal trauma while the car was on fire. Who is he? I work at Titan Core. They fired him yesterday." That last one landed hard. By noon, a still frame of Nate's soot-covered face, focused, unsmiling, crouched beside the victim, was circulating across half a dozen local news outlets. The headline rotated, but the message stayed the same. "Unknown civilian saves woman from car fire. Identified as recently fired janitor." In a downtown conference room lined with smart boards and catered pastries, the Titan Core PR team was already in damage control mode. Marcus sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, watching the muted footage loop on screen. "Do we know anything else yet?" he asked. Dana, the head of PR, flipped her tablet around. "His full name's Nathaniel Kessler. Worked nights at first. Moved to day shift 6 months ago. No HR complaints. Perfect attendance except for yesterday. He was late by 5 minutes." "Right. And you fired him in the lobby," she added, without looking up. "That wasn't recorded." "No. But the termination timestamp matches the witness posts, and now they're piecing it together online." Marcus rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Do we have a cause of the accident?" Dana shook her head. "Nothing confirmed. The woman's name is Evelyn Royce. Registered nurse, works for one of our insurance subsidiaries. She hasn't spoken to the press yet." He looked up. When she does, this could get worse. It will, she said plainly. One of the interns in the back raised a hand hesitantly. Should we, put out a statement of support? For him? Marcus turned toward him. The boy shrank half an inch. Dana answered instead. If we do it now, it'll look like we're scrambling to save face. Give it a day. Let the dust settle. Marcus didn't nod, didn't speak, just stared back at the screen. In the footage, Nate wasn't looking at the camera. He never noticed it at all. He had his hands on the victim's shoulder, stabilizing her. Not rushing, not panicking, just present, sharp, like someone who'd done this before. Across the city, Nate stood at the pharmacy counter, a paper prescription in hand, and Lila beside him. He hadn't seen the video. His phone was off. News apps were uninstalled months ago. All he knew was that the school nurse had called again and Lila's breath had caught during lunch. And now, they were here. The pharmacist scanned the paper and frowned. Still pending under the new plan, could take 72 hours. Nate exhaled. What's the cost without it? 92 plus tax. He had $103 in his account. He reached for his wallet. Lila tugged his sleeve. Daddy, the TV has your picture. He looked up. Behind the counter, a small television played the local news on low volume. The anchor was talking over the footage, his footage. There he was, dragging Evelyn from the car, wrapping her leg, speaking to first responders. A red banner scrolled beneath. Unidentified hero confirmed as former firefighter, more to come. The pharmacist turned to look at him, eyes widening. That's you? Nate hesitated, then nodded. The man straightened. Sir, I didn't realize. I'm waiving the fee, and I'll expedite the form personally. That's not necessary. It is, the man insisted. It's the least we can do. Nate looked down at Lila. Her eyes were wide, but proud. He let the wallet fall closed. Later that afternoon, Evelyn Royce sat in a hospital room with her leg in a brace and her head wrapped in gauze. She'd been silent most of the morning. The doctor had come and gone. Her supervisor called twice. She hadn't answered. A reporter had reached out. So had someone from Titan Core. But when the nurse came in with a tablet and said, "There's something you should see," she accepted it. It was the video. She watched the whole thing, watched herself being pulled out of fire and glass by the man with the calm voice. Watched him disappear before the cameras could catch him properly. "Do you know him?" the nurse asked. Evelyn nodded slowly. "Yeah, I've seen him mopping the elevator bank at Titan Core every morning." The nurse looked surprised. Evelyn reached for the nurse's pen and paper. When the nurse returned 10 minutes later, Evelyn handed her the note. "Can you get this to the media?" The nurse read it, then read it again. It was simple, but it hit like a siren. "The man who saved my life wasn't a janitor. He was the calmest field commander I've ever seen. If I'd had him on shift with me in trauma triage, we'd have saved more people. His name is Nate Kessler, and Titan Core fired him hours before he saved me. I think the city deserves to know why." The break room at Titan Core had never been quiet, but today the silence felt personal. Kayla leaned against the counter, stirring her coffee without drinking it. Across the table, two admins stared at a paused video frame on someone's phone. Nate's face, caught in the middle of pulling Evelyn Royce from the wreckage, filled the screen. His eyes looked focused, certain. Not like a man who'd spent the last year pushing a mop through fluorescent hallways. "That's him," one whispered. "He always held the elevator when my hands were full." "Helped me jump my car last winter," said the other. A third voice joined from behind them. "Taught me how to properly use a fire extinguisher," said, "just in case." I thought he was joking. Kayla set her cup down. Marcus hasn't said anything yet, right? Everyone looked at her, then away. No one wanted to be the first to confirm it. She checked her phone. Still no internal memo. Still no statement. Just news notifications piling up. Every major outlet running some version of the story. Some headlines just called him a hero. Others were harsher. Titan Core janitor fired hours before saving life. Former firefighter hidden in plain sight. Humiliated then hero. Corporate dismissal. Sparks online outrage. Ex-captain turned custodian. The man who did what professionals hesitated to. Kayla glanced toward the hall. No sign of Marcus. At that exact moment, Marcus Ellery was sitting in his office with the blinds drawn and his laptop closed. He didn't need to look at anything. Everything he needed to know had already been said, just not to his face. Dana's voice crackled over the speakerphone. It's not dying down. I noticed. Evelyn Royce gave a written statement this morning, called him a field commander. Called us out. His eyes twitched. Where is it? Everywhere. Marcus stood, paced to the window, but didn't open the blinds. His reflection stared back, vague and distorted in the matte glass. He was a janitor, he said. Dana didn't answer right away. He was a firefighter, a decorated one, according to Channel 7. Commendations from 2 city departments. He stepped down after his wife died. Took a civilian job to raise his daughter. How do you know all that? She hesitated. Because I looked it up, like everyone else. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. So now I'm the villain who fired a grieving hero. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The line went quiet. Then Dana said, people are asking why he was working here at all. He turned back to the desk because we hire people, and we fire them when they're late. This isn't that kind of story, Marcus. He sat again, but slower. She was right. This wasn't about policy. It was about perception. And perception had slipped out of his hands the second that video hit the front page. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Nate stood outside a fire station that no longer bore his name. Engine 14, once home, now foreign. He hadn't planned to come here. His feet just took him, like muscle memory. The place had barely changed. The windows still reflected the same patch of sky. The bell still hung by the doorway, polished weakly. He kept his distance. From inside, a young firefighter spotted him through the glass. A few seconds later, the door opened. Captain Devin Reyes stepped out. Nate hadn't seen him in years. They regarded each other for a moment. The wind lifted the hem of Nate's jacket. Reyes broke the silence. You made the news. Nate nodded. Why didn't you tell anyone? I didn't want a spotlight, just wanted to raise my daughter. Reyes crossed his arms. You saved someone, Nate. That woman's alive because of you. I didn't do it for the headlines. I know. That's what makes it matter. Nate looked down. I got fired before it happened, for being late. Reyes didn't blink. Still had it in you. I wasn't sure I did. Trust me, Reyes said, nodding toward the station. Everyone in there is sure. Nate exhaled. Not a breath of peace, but something close to it. He didn't ask to come in. Didn't need to. Just turned and walked away, his back straighter than when he arrived. That evening, a special segment aired across several news channels. The opening line said it all. Tonight we bring you the story of a man who fell through the cracks, only to climb out when it mattered most. It featured clips of the rescue, Evelyn's written statement, interviews with neighbors and co-workers, but the part that caught fire came from a firefighter's testimonial. He was more than good. He trained half of us. Some people leave medals. Nate left legacies. By morning, a petition demanding an apology from Titan Core had crossed 80,000 signatures. Someone even started a fundraiser. Not that Nate had asked for one. But strangers did what corporations hadn't. They saw what mattered and tried to make it right. And in the middle of it all, Nate stayed quiet. He took Lila to school, he checked the mail, he paid for groceries in cash, because some men don't need microphones to be heard. They wait, they prepare, and when the next fire comes, they know exactly where to stand. It started with a knock on the door. Not loud, not urgent, but steady. Nate paused mid-sentence as he read aloud from Lila's bedtime book, then rose, heart already tense. It was nearly 9 p.m. Unusual hour for a visit. Lila sat up in bed, hugging her stuffed giraffe. "I'll be right back," he said gently, tucking the blanket over her shoulders. The hallway felt longer than usual. The shadows had settled strangely tonight. He opened the door halfway, keeping the chain in place. On the other side stood a man in a gray windbreaker, his ID badge lanyard catching the hallway light. "Nate Kessler?" the man asked. "I'm with Channel 7. I know it's late. I just wanted to ask—" "No," Nate said. The reporter didn't flinch. Not even one quote? Nate looked past him and saw the telltale glow of a camera lens further down the hallway. Someone crouched behind it. "You've got what you need," Nate said. "Use that." He closed the door without another word. He didn't slam it. He didn't need to. Back in Lila's room, she was already flipping through the book on her own, humming a tune she'd made up. He sat beside her again and took a breath. But she looked up before he could continue. "Why are people looking at you like that?" she asked. He hesitated. "What do you mean?" "At the store, the gas station. Today the teacher asked if you were in a movie." He met her gaze. "Remember when we talked about what happens when people find out something you didn't want to show?" She nodded. "I did something that helped someone. That's all. Some people think it's a big deal." She was quiet for a second. "You always help people," she said. He smiled, but it didn't reach far. "I used to think I had to wear a uniform to do it. Turns out I was wrong." She leaned against his shoulder. "I don't like the cameras." "Me neither." They read in silence for a while longer. Outside, the hallway footsteps faded. The elevator dinged once. Across the city, the video was still gaining traction. A new version now circulated, remastered by someone with editing skills. It included a slow zoom on Nate's face, audio synced with Evelyn's testimony, and a soft instrumental soundtrack behind the narration. The internet had named it "The Janitor Who Ran Toward Fire." The views ticked past 2 million by midnight. And with each share, Marcus Ellery's name came up more often. Never in praise. The silence from Titan Core had gone from suspicious to damning. People wanted a response. But inside the C-suite, Marcus wasn't preparing a statement. He was watching the news again for the third time. This time it wasn't just the fire footage. It was the firefighter who had once served with Nate, the captain, Reyes. "We lost a lot of good ones over the years," Reyes said into the camera. "But Kessler? He didn't burn out. He walked away for his daughter. I never saw anyone work a collapse zone like he could. He was the guy you wanted when everything fell apart." Marcus rubbed his jaw, suddenly aware of how quiet his office had become. His reflection in the black monitor looked unfamiliar. Dana entered a few minutes later with a printed list. "What's that?" he asked. "Names of board members who've reached out about the story. All of them, one way or another." He took the paper, scanned it. "And HR? They're reviewing the footage from the lobby. It's bad. No audio, but the body language." She stopped herself. "You come off like someone trying to make an example out of him." "I was." She blinked. He didn't elaborate. Just set the paper down. She stood still. Then, cautiously said, "There's still time." "For what? To act like a human being?" He looked at her then. Not defensive, not angry, just tired. I don't think that's going to work anymore. That same night, Evelyn Royce sat in her hospital bed with a stack of unopened flowers beside her and her discharge papers in hand. She turned the tablet screen away from the nurse, finished typing, and hit send. The email went out to every news outlet in the city. Subject line: "He didn't just save me, he fixed a system failure." In the body of the email, she included 2 attachments: her medical chart from the incident, with Nate's field triage notes hastily scribbled in the margins, and a note he'd written on the back of a supply checklist. Secure airway first, stay low, bleeding left lower. Secondary trauma likely, watch femur. She wrote beneath it, "This man didn't just pull me from a wreck. He stabilized me better than the first responder who took over." The fact that Titan Corps let him mop their floors instead of training their team speaks more to their priorities than his. It was short. It didn't need to be long. The message was loud enough. 2 blocks from Nate's apartment, a man in a business suit stood by the curb, arms crossed, watching a black car idle in the road. Inside it, the engine ran silent and expensive. After a long minute, the man opened the back door and stepped in. "Go," Marcus said to the driver. His voice was calm, but his eyes stayed fixed forward, seeing nothing. Tomorrow, he'd walk into a building he no longer controlled. Because somewhere beneath the polished marble and high-speed elevators, a man he'd dismissed without thought had just rewritten the company's entire legacy. And he hadn't used a single word to do it. The Titan Corps lobby had been polished to a mirror shine that morning, as if surface reflection could distract from deeper cracks. But the silence inside said otherwise. Marcus stepped through the sliding glass doors just after 8 a.m., sharp. No entourage, no coffee in hand, just a tailored suit he didn't remember choosing, and a knot in his stomach he hadn't felt since his early days in corporate law. He didn't make eye contact with the security guard, though the man certainly noticed. Instead of his usual curt nod, Marcus walked past him wordlessly, heading for the elevators. He pressed the button, then waited as the quiet in the room thickened. Behind him, whispers began to gather. Small clusters of employees in business casual and cleaning uniforms, exchanging glances over phones still glowing with headlines. No one said his name, but the weight of him settled in the space like static before a storm. When the elevator arrived, he stepped in alone, up to the floor where everything had begun. Meanwhile, Nate stood outside an elementary school in a simple collared shirt and worn jeans, watching Lila through the chain-link fence as she played during morning recess. She hadn't stopped talking all breakfast. About her drawing, about the cereal surprise box, about how her music teacher had given her a gold star just for breathing normal. That one had made him smile. But now, he just watched, calm, unmoving. He needed to see it with his own eyes, her laughing, running, unbothered by the chaos orbiting their lives. He hadn't answered any calls since the rescue. The phone rang dozens of times. Reporters, strangers, even someone from the mayor's office. He'd let them all go to voicemail. This moment, it mattered more. She waved at him from across the yard. He raised a hand, palm out. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. He turned slowly. A woman in a navy pencil skirt stood there, clipboard clutched, posture hesitant. She introduced herself, corporate liaison, Titan Corps. She'd been sent with a message. She didn't give a business card. "Nate," she said carefully, "Mr. Ellery would like to speak with you, personally. He's—" "No," Nate said. She blinked. "He's waiting at—" "I'm not," he said. "I'm here." She adjusted her grip on the clipboard. "He's prepared to issue a formal apology. He's also—" "I didn't ask for that either." A pause. Her voice softened. "He said if you declined, he'd understand. But I think he's trying." Nate looked past her, back to the playground. Lila had started teaching a boy how to climb the jungle gym using a firefighter's crawl. He laughed when she said, "Lower. You have to breathe under the smoke." He exhaled slowly. "I'll come. One time, one room, no cameras." The woman nodded quickly. "We'll arrange it." By mid-afternoon, the boardroom was cleared. Marcus stood at the far end, alone, except for Dana and two senior executives, both of whom had chosen their seats far from the head of the table. Their expressions were unreadable, but they didn't hide their caution. He glanced at the clock. Nate entered a minute later. He didn't knock. He wore no badge, no company uniform, just a jacket that had clearly seen better days and the same walk Marcus remembered from the lobby, measured like someone who'd already survived worse than awkward rooms. The silence between them stretched as Nate stood by the door, hands in his pockets. Marcus cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." Nate didn't answer. He just waited. "I've made mistakes," Marcus said. "This was one of them." No reaction. "I treated you like someone who didn't matter. Publicly. I misjudged not just your worth, but your entire purpose here." Still nothing. Dana watched from her corner of the room, eyes flicking between them. Marcus tried again. "I want to offer reinstatement, a revised position, safety officer, emergency training lead, any—" "I don't want the job," Nate said finally. His voice wasn't angry, just steady. Quiet in a way that made the words feel final. Marcus swallowed. "Then let me offer something else." "Don't offer me anything," Nate said. "Offer it to the others, the ones still invisible in this building." "What do you mean? Train them? Equip them? Every janitor, every night shift, every cook. You expect them to clean up after fire drills, but none of them know what a fire actually does." Marcus said nothing. "You've got the budget, and now you've got the reason?" Dana scribbled something on her notepad. Nate turned to go, but paused. "One more thing." Marcus looked up. "If you ever fire someone again in front of a crowd, look them in the eye." Then he walked out. 2 weeks later, a new policy rolled out company-wide. Emergency preparedness certification for all staff regardless of role or department. Optional at first, then quietly made mandatory. The first to sign up? Kayla from floor 7. The second? One of the night shift maintenance leads who hadn't spoken during the entire ordeal, but now wore a small silver pin with Nate's initials engraved under a helmet icon. Titan Core didn't say why the training program had started, but people knew. And somewhere in a quiet apartment 2 blocks away, a man folded Lila's crayon drawing into a clean frame and hung it beside the front door. In the picture, he was running into fire. But in the corner, she had drawn something new, a tiny figure behind him, smiling. The volunteer sign-up list in the break room filled up faster than anyone expected. By the 3rd day of the new emergency preparedness program, there was a wait list, not for managers, not for executives, but for janitors, custodians, kitchen staff, and part-time assistants. People who usually passed unnoticed in the corporate blur were now sitting in small classrooms off the loading dock, learning CPR, fire suppression, evacuation protocols, and real triage basics. At the front of the room stood a woman with a training manual and a clipboard. But the one everyone listened to was the man beside her, tall, quiet, calm. Nate stood with his arms folded, scanning the group as they listened. He hadn't wanted to teach, but they kept asking him to come back, not as a figurehead, as an example. At first, he said no. Then Evelyn Royce called. She didn't pressure him. She just said, "If you teach them what you know, maybe someone else gets to go home next time." So he returned, not as staff, not on payroll, just for the training sessions, just for the ones who never had a voice in the building until now. He didn't stand behind a podium. He didn't use notes. He didn't tell them his story, unless they asked, but they always did. And every time he ended with the same sentence. Skill doesn't care about your job title. Back at Titan Corps' executive level, things had changed, but not too loud, not too fast. Marcus Ellery still wore the same suits, still ran the same board meetings, but he didn't speak over people as much. He started using names, first names, when addressing staff in hallways. Not because it changed everything, but because it was a start. His office wall, once lined with awards and stock performance graphs, now had a framed quote at its center. Simple text on a black field. Dignity is not a department. He hadn't told anyone who sent it. Dana had. After the press cooled and the board meeting stopped bristling with tension, she'd found it printed on a postcard slipped under her office door. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting. Same as the fire protocol checklist Nate had written on the night of the rescue. No signature. None needed. One morning, Nate returned from a training session and found a letter in his mailbox. Handwritten, no company seal, folded neatly inside. It was from Reyes, captain of Engine 14. Nate, I watched your training video. You still teach like someone who believes in people. That's rare. We've got an opening. Training consultant for our civilian liaison program. No badge. No return to the front lines. Just someone who knows how to talk to people when they're scared. Let me know. Dr. Nate set the letter down beside his coffee and stared at it for a long time. He didn't want to go back to the world he left. But this wasn't a return. It was a bridge. That evening, Lila came home from school holding a folder with a red sticker on it. "Guess what?" she said, grinning. "What?" Nate asked, kneeling to her height. "I got picked to be fire safety monitor next month. I have to learn how to check extinguishers and make a map." He smiled. "Looks like someone's got a knack for it. I think it runs in the family." She raced off to draw her safety map, and he leaned against the kitchen counter, something warm rising in his chest. Not pride exactly. Something deeper. Legacy, maybe. Later that night, while she slept, he pulled out his old helmet from the back of the closet. It still had scorch marks near the brim, a faded sticker on the side with his unit number half worn away. He didn't polish it. He didn't have to. He just placed it on the table beside Lila's crayon map and sat in silence, letting both objects speak. The next week, Titan Corps hosted an internal recognition ceremony. Not a press event, not a PR move. Just something small in the main lobby, under the old company mission statement plaque. There was no red carpet, but people showed up anyway. Evelyn Royce arrived with a cane and a determined smile. She hugged Nate without warning and whispered, "My niece wants to be a paramedic now. Said you made it look like art." Kayla from floor 7 brought cupcakes with fire symbols made from red icing. Even the head of maintenance showed up in a button-up shirt and handed Nate a wrapped box. Inside was a new clipboard, mahogany, smooth edges, and etched initials in the corner. NK Dana gave the only speech. She didn't mention titles or metrics, just one sentence. "We build stronger walls by remembering who ran in when others ran out." And in that moment, nobody cared who was CEO or janitor or nurse. They just clapped. Not because they had to, but because they finally saw what they'd missed all along. And for once, they didn't look away. Nate didn't like standing in front of cameras, but that's where he found himself again. This time in a fire station garage, surrounded by steel lockers, worn boots, and folding chairs filled with recruits half his age. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just a navy shirt with the department insignia sewn over the chest, a borrowed title, civilian liaison, and field instructor. Temporary, they'd said, but the looks in their eyes told him it wouldn't stay that way. He adjusted his stance, scanning the room. The air smelled of oil, sweat, and something metallic that never quite left these places. "Fire doesn't care about who you are," he began. "It doesn't care if you've got rank or if you're just the guy sweeping the floors. The room quieted. It only cares if you know what to do next. One of the recruits raised a hand. Did you really use a seatbelt to stop a leg wound? Nate gave the faintest nod. And an airbag to carry her over broken glass. Improvisation is part of the job. You don't always get the tools, but you better have the mind. They were listening. Not politely, intensely. That difference mattered. Another asked, "What about fear? How do you shut it off?" "You don't," Nate said. "You just work faster than it." The words settled deep. Later, while the recruits filed out for break, one lingered. A lanky young man with soot still on his cheek and nervous energy in his spine. "My dad's a janitor," he said. "Always said he wasn't anything special." Nate looked at him. "Tell him he's wrong." Meanwhile, Titan Corps' internal newsletter published a piece titled "From Floor to Firelight, Recognizing Hidden Strength." It wasn't slick. It wasn't overly polished, but it was honest. It opened with a paragraph that read, "Sometimes the person you walk past every day without noticing is the one who saves your life. This month, we honor a man who showed us that strength isn't always loud, and leadership doesn't need a title." The article was written by Kayla. She'd asked for permission first. Nate gave it reluctantly after reading it twice. She had gotten everything right, including the part where she admitted she used to look away when she saw him pushing his mop cart. "I thought I was better than him," she wrote. Then he reminded the world what real worth looks like. The article closed with a photo, not the fire footage, not the lobby, just Nate, holding a fire extinguisher and showing a group of janitorial staff how to check the pressure valve. His daughter stood beside him, wearing a Titan Corps visitor badge and pointing at the nozzle with a proud grin. The caption read, "Every floor has its foundation." A week later, Lila's school held its first ever Everyday Hero Day. The students were told to dress as someone who inspires them, not celebrities or cartoon characters, but real people in their lives. She came dressed in navy blue pants and a red t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a tight braid. She carried a toy extinguisher in one hand and a clipboard in the other. When her teacher asked who she was dressed as, she answered without hesitation, "My dad. He saves people, and he makes sure nobody feels small." Someone snapped a photo. It ended up in the school newsletter and then on a local parenting blog, then a national one. And then it didn't belong to just them anymore. But Nate didn't mind, because when he asked her that night if she still wanted to be a music teacher, she nodded. "I just want to help people breathe better," she said. That was enough. At a small hardware store 3 blocks from their apartment, a middle-aged man was restocking shelves when a familiar face walked in. Nate approached the counter with a list of supplies, mostly practical things. A wrench, a replacement smoke detector battery, a first aid refill kit. The man behind the counter didn't speak at first. Then he said, "You used to buy bleach and mop heads." Nate met his gaze. "Still do." "Yeah," the man said, nodding slowly. "But people walk in here now and ask what kind of gloves you use, like they expect some secret recipe." Nate raised an eyebrow. "Whatever you've done, it's changed things. People don't ignore the quiet ones as much anymore." He handed over the bag. "No charge? I can pay." "You already did," the man replied, then added under his breath, "for all of us." That night, Nate and Lila sat on the rooftop of their building, eating sandwiches from paper wrappers. She counted the blinking lights on the horizon while he leaned back against the ledge, eyes scanning the stars. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Sometimes." She nodded. "I think you still do it, though." "Do what?" "Save people, just slower now." He chuckled softly. "That's not a bad thing." "I didn't say it was." She leaned her head on his arm. The night was cool. The city below murmured with distant sirens, but none of them were his to answer anymore. Still he listened, and somewhere, deep in the fabric of things, the world felt a little more aware of the people it used to overlook. A little more careful, a little more ready. Because sometimes all it takes is one man refusing to walk away quietly. The parking lot was quiet, except for the steady hum of sodium lights and the soft scrape of brooms finishing up the night shift. Nate stood near the back entrance of Titan Core, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the glow that pooled across the pavement like a quiet lake. He hadn't planned on coming tonight, but Reyes had asked. "You still got your old gear?" he'd said over the phone. "I do. You might want to bring it, just once." So he had. Now, leaning against the wall near the staff entrance, he waited. Not for recognition, not for ceremony, just for something to close. Something that had begun the day he was fired in the very building behind him. The door opened. Dana stepped out. She wasn't in heels today, just worn flats and a blazer creased at the elbows. She walked with purpose but didn't rush. "They're ready," she said simply. He followed her inside, through quiet corridors, past the lobby where it all unraveled, and into the auditorium, where rows of folding chairs had been, arranged in tight lines facing a temporary stage. There were no reporters, no banners, just employees, floor staff, janitors, techs, assistants. A few executives lined the back wall, standing. At the front, Marcus waited. This time, he didn't wear a suit. No tie, no script in hand. He nodded once when Nate approached, then stepped aside. Nate looked at the crowd. He hadn't prepared remarks, hadn't wanted to speak, but they waited. Not out of obligation, but expectation. Something in the silence told him this wasn't about closure for them. It was about belief, about what came next. He stepped forward. "I've cleaned these floors," he said, "and I've crawled through buildings while they were on fire, and I'm here to tell you, one's not more important than the other." No one moved. He continued, voice calm. "Because either way, someone's trusting you, someone's walking behind you, hoping you're doing your job right. Whether you're scrubbing spills or checking air pressure on a tank, your work matters." A slow nod rippled across the front row. "I was fired here, right out there in the lobby." He pointed. "Not because I couldn't do my job, but because someone assumed I had no other worth." He let that sit for a moment. They were wrong, but more than that, they weren't looking. And that's the problem we all have sometimes. We forget to look. In the back row, Kayla lowered her eyes, then slowly raised them again. Beside her, two maintenance techs leaned in just slightly, listening with hands folded. "So," Nate said, "if this place is going to change, it doesn't start with policy. It starts with the next time you see someone pushing a cart, or hauling boxes, or eating lunch alone in the corner." He gave a quiet nod. "You look. And you remember this? Anyone might be the person who runs into the fire." He stepped back. Applause didn't burst. It built, a wave, slow and rising. Not performative, not polite. Real. Marcus approached him afterward, not with an outstretched hand, but a clipboard. It had one document attached. Nate glanced down. A company-wide training initiative, not temporary, not optional, expanded and funded, with a line item added, Crisis Response Certification, Tier 2, Civilian Leadership Track. Lead instructor, N. Kessler, external consultant. He raised an eyebrow. Marcus said, "We'd like to make it permanent." Nate looked at him, quiet. "You sure?" he asked. "You know what you're agreeing to?" "I do. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I won't say the right corporate phrases." "I hope you don't." Nate didn't answer right away, just folded the paper in half and tucked it into his jacket. I'll think about it. Marcus nodded once. That was enough. Later that night, back home, Lila was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, coloring on a fresh stack of printer paper. She looked up when he came in. Were they nice? To you? He hung his jacket. They listened. Did you teach them something? I hope so. She held up a drawing. 2 figures, hand in hand. One in a firefighter's helmet, the other wearing a yellow vest and a mop in his hand. They're the same, she said. He walked over, took the drawing carefully, and studied it. They are, he said. She grinned. You want to keep it? He nodded. She handed it to him like it was the most important thing she owned. Maybe it was. He placed it on the counter beside her other drawings, beside his old badge, beside the empty inhaler he hadn't thrown away yet. Not because he needed the reminder, but because some symbols matter, even after they're used up, even after the fire is out, especially then, because that's when people start rebuilding, and that's when people remember who held the line when everything else failed. The hospital hallway smelled like antiseptic and coffee that had sat too long on a burner. Nate moved quietly past the nurse's station, his boots making soft sounds against the waxed tile. In his hand was a small paper bag, 1 apple, a granola bar, and a folded note. He'd made the same delivery 3 times this week. Evelyn Royce was seated upright when he entered her room. Her crutches leaned against the chair, and a new brace wrapped her leg. She was already dressed to leave, the discharge papers resting on her lap. You're early, she said, smiling faintly. You're always ready before they expect, he replied. He handed her the bag. She opened it, peered inside, and chuckled. Still the same snack? You're predictable. It's comforting. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Not awkward, just full. She spoke first. You know they're naming the protocol after you? He tilted his head. The emergency response training, the one they rolled out company-wide. He looked unimpressed. Didn't ask for that. I know, she said, but that's why it matters. People listen to the quiet ones now. He nodded. Some do. Enough, she said, to start shifting the ground. She picked up her cane and stood slowly, testing the brace. He didn't reach to help, just stood beside her in case. As they made their way to the elevator, she said, I filed for internal review. Not to sue, just to document what happened. The firing, the oversight, the culture. Will it change anything? It already is, she said. You're not the only one they've ignored. He didn't respond, but his silence was never emptiness. It carried weight. Later that afternoon, Dana stood in the Titan Core lobby reviewing a new installation being mounted on the wall beside the original mission statement. It was small, just a single, framed photo. No plaque, no headline. The image showed the back of a man kneeling beside a burning car, his arms braced as he lifted someone free. Smoke curled around his shoulders. His name wasn't visible. His uniform wasn't labeled. But everyone who worked here now knew who it was. And more importantly, they knew what it meant. The image wasn't there to celebrate a moment. It was there to remind them what had been ignored for too long. Marcus passed by briefly on his way to a meeting. He paused, hands behind his back, studying the image for a moment. He didn't comment. He simply stood there until the elevator chimed. Then he stepped inside and let the doors close behind him. That evening, Nate stopped by the firehouse on his way home. Not for duty, just for conversation. Reyes met him at the back table where coffee was always lukewarm and the air smelled faintly of old smoke and gear oil. They didn't shake hands. They never had to. You thinking about the liaison role? Reyes asked. I'm thinking about it. You'd be good at it. Nate took a slow sip of coffee. You know the difference between mopping a floor and leading a rescue? Reyes tilted his head. Nothing, if you know what's beneath your feet. Reyes smiled. You always did talk like a sermon. I talk like a dad. Same thing. They sat for a while, exchanging few words, watching a rookie gear up wrong and get corrected in real time. It made them both grin. I'm not looking for titles, Nate said. You're not, but people need faces. Calm ones. Ones that don't flinch. I don't want to be a symbol. You already are. The question now is, do you use it or walk away from it? Nate didn't answer. Not yet. Back at the apartment, Lila had laid out a picnic on the living room floor. 2 sandwiches, a bowl of grapes, and juice boxes. He raised an eyebrow. It's your reward, she said. For what? For finishing the week? That's what Ms. T said to do for people you love? He sat down beside her, letting the stiffness in his knees ease out. They ate in comfortable silence until she asked, If you were still a janitor, would people care this much? He paused. I don't know, he said. I'd like to believe they should have. She frowned. That's not fair. No, he agreed, but that's why we remember. She leaned into him again. I'm glad you didn't stay invisible. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder. I never was. Not to you. A few blocks away, Kayla sat on her couch, laptop open, writing a speech for the next internal training seminar. She was tasked with opening remarks. The slide deck beside her glowed faintly. One slide had no text, just a single quote. You don't always get the tools, but you better have the mind. NK. She stared at it for a long time, then smiled and began typing. Sometimes change didn't begin in boardrooms or with policies. Sometimes it started when one man did the right thing, quietly, without asking, without demanding anything in return. And sometimes that was enough to make others do the same. The bench outside the apartment building had been broken for months. Slats warped from rain, one armrest snapped clean through. Nate passed it every day, never stopping. But this morning, with Lila at school and no obligations pressing against his back, he paused. He turned back, crouched low, and ran a hand across the peeling wood. It wobbled under the gentlest pressure. The screws were rusted, half of them missing. A quiet hazard, a forgotten thing. He stood and went upstairs. An hour later, he returned with a toolbox, a thermos of coffee, and a set of replacement slats he'd bought months ago, but never installed. The morning sun caught the edge of his jaw as he sat and began disassembling the rot. Piece by piece, people passed him. Some nodded. A few slowed down. One older woman whispered to her grandson, "That's him." He didn't stop working. Across the city, Marcus Ellery sat in his office, staring at a summary report with no clear action items. There were graphs, survey results, comments pulled from anonymous employee forms. But the real message wasn't in the data. It was in the tone. I feel safer here now. I didn't realize we mattered until recently. Someone taught me how to use a defibrillator. He used to sweep the elevator bank. He leaned back in his chair. The changes hadn't cost much, but the impact, that was the part he hadn't calculated. He rose and walked to the wall where the framed photo still hung. Nate, crouched beside the car wreck, caught mid-action in a moment most people would run from. He studied the image for a long time, then did something he'd never done before. He walked down to the break room, no assistant, no announcement, and when the room fell quiet, he looked at the janitor wiping down the counter and said, "Hey, how's your morning?" It wasn't much, but it was where things start. Back on the bench, Nate wiped sweat from his forehead. The wood was sanded and sealed. The new bolts tightened. The legs braced. The whole thing sat level now. No creaks, no sway. He sat down, exhaled. It held. He let himself rest there for a while, sipping from the thermos as the neighborhood moved around him. Children shouted in the distance. A bus hissed to a stop. A dog barked from a balcony. All normal, all beautiful. He watched it without rushing. Reyes's letter still sat on the kitchen counter upstairs. The liaison role was waiting, unclaimed. No deadline, just an open door. Nate hadn't decided yet. He didn't need to, not today. Today was for something simpler. Something that didn't need a title or a policy or applause. Just a place to sit. A thing repaired. A piece of the world no longer broken. Lila came running up the sidewalk an hour later, her backpack bouncing, a paper crumpled in her hand. "Daddy." He looked up and smiled. "How was school?" She didn't answer right away, just dropped onto the bench beside him and caught her breath. Then she handed him the paper. It was a certificate, handwritten in bold marker and covered in stickers. Lila Kessler, Fire Safety Hero of the Month. He grinned. Hero of the Month, huh? I showed the class how to use the fire blanket, and I told them how smoke moves, and Ms. T said I was unreasonably prepared. "That's my girl," she beamed. Then her expression turned curious. "Are you going to take the job?" He looked at her. "Do you want me to?" She shrugged. "I just want you to still be home when I wake up." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll make sure I always am." She leaned against his side, small and warm and content. They sat like that until the sun dipped lower, painting the sidewalk in long gold shadows. Later that evening, as the city settled into its hum, Dana stood on a small rooftop garden at Titan Core, watching the last group of safety trainees run their final drill. It was messy, slightly disorganized, but no one panicked. And when the smoke machine hissed and the alarms blared, a woman in maintenance coveralls barked orders like she'd been doing it for years. Dana smiled and made a note on her clipboard. Progress. Beside her, Kayla stood watching with folded arms. "I used to think leadership wore lanyards," she said. "Now I know better." Dana glanced at her. "What does it wear?" Kayla considered. "A tired jacket, a backpack, sometimes a kid on their hip." They both laughed quietly. Then, for a while, they said nothing at all. In a quiet apartment, Nate opened a drawer he hadn't touched in months. Inside, the badge, the turnout coat, a photo of his wife holding Lila as a baby. He didn't pull any of it out. He just closed the drawer gently, then turned to the living room, where Lila sat drawing again. This time it wasn't fire, it was water. A house being rebuilt, trees, a bench, a man holding a toolbox, a girl beside him. He watched her for a long time. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a man between chapters. He felt like one who had finished something worth remembering, something that didn't need fire to be real. It just needed to last. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. CEO said stay in your place until the single dad janitor saved a $50 an hour's deal with one call. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?